Hey folks, thanks for joining me for this episode from the Embellish Pod. If you got here by chance, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. Hopefully I can be found on any podcasting platform that exists. And if you can't find me on a platform, send me an email at embellishpod@gmail.com and I'll get that taken care of. You can also find video versions of this podcast on YouTube. You can find all of my links on Instagram at EmbellishPod or TikTok with the same handle for as long as they keep that thing alive. I have a website. It is www.embellishpod.com. It's also a place to pick up these links, episode details, and more. This afternoon, I will have Logan from Blue Note Distilling, Blue Note Bourbon joining me to talk through some of the things that they've got going on. And I've really been looking forward to this conversation since I think it's been like almost 2 years since the Crossroads was released. So I hope you guys enjoy this conversation. I have an explicit rating or not. So if you see damn or hell, or it's fine. This is a podcast about whiskey. I know generically in business, people try to avoid those things, but
No,
it is what
I'm
it
fine.
is.
It's the industry we're in, so we're good.
Yeah. That's what I often get caught up in. That people are like, oh yeah. I'm like, if there is an 8-year-old watching or listening to a whiskey
You've got a
podcast, like
problem.
that's a different
Yeah,
conversation
if
altogether.
it's a family get together around the shot of bourbon,
Right.
that's another conversation.
Yeah, cool. All right. So this afternoon, I have Logan Welk joining me from BR Distilling, also from Blue Note. Logan, if you would give me kind of give me your introduction and let me know who you are.
Yeah, so my background, I think, is a little bit interesting from what most people associate with this business. I actually got started off in the business banking side of things. So I used to work for First Horizon here in Memphis, then went on to KPMG, which is one of the big four audit tax advisory firms. So I got to work with a bunch of really interesting clients, primarily financial services, but carried all of that knowledge, lots of hours business experience into this. Came on as CFO, then progression up to president. So that's where I'm at today.
As I kind of do background research on people and on products, I come across, you obviously have had a pretty healthy career in the financial sector, but you're not actually from Memphis, right? You're a transplant, I believe, from St. Louis or the St. Louis area, maybe
Exactly. Yep. Out of
an
St. Louis
unincorporated city
originally.
in St. Louis. Well,
Yep.
so you came to Memphis to go to college. What about Memphis grabbed a hold of you and said, you know what, you're not going to go anywhere?
Yep. So I mean, it was honestly before I even came here for college on the first tour. So I went to Rhodes, and
Mhm.
it was a city, especially on that campus, where everyone was so welcoming. It certainly stands out. I guess that's what the whole Southern hospitality means to somebody from the Midwest. But um, it is a small town feel with a big city. Obviously, with some of the news, we've got a lot of big city problems currently, but it is a very tight knit community, and the level of separation between any one individual is pretty limited. So there's a lot of really cool connections that developed and ultimately stuck around in Memphis.
And I'll say this is, I'm not very far from Memphis, and Memphis happens to be one of the places that if I'm going to hub out for a flight, it's either going to be Memphis or Nashville because I'm in the very far western portion of Kentucky, the little booty portion of
Uh,
it. But now the city that I'm in and the college that I went to, Memphis has become kind of our second home because we're the home of Ja Morant, with Murray State
yep.
University. We kind of exported him to that city. Memphis, as far as Tennessee cities go, has maybe more of a soul to it than just about anything else in Tennessee. And
It
Knoxville
does.
and Nashville think what they want to think about it, but there's a strong feel that exists in that city, and I can see why a person would end up there. So you came from the financial sector into spirits. Was this just there's a job open and you went after it, or was there some other underlying reason?
So I mean, it was I was working for a business as CFO with the intention of actually buying it out.
Mhm.
Ultimately, that fell through with some due diligence issues that came up, and then one of the recruiters I'd worked with in the past came across there's this opportunity. Somehow, actually hadn't run across the people involved with the business at that time, even though they had worked with some of my friends that I went to school with. But yeah, it was a I guess a pretty standard interview process. One thing that always stands out to me, people from Memphis will appreciate this because we have terrible roads. The first interview I had here, I got a flat tire on the way, so I had to Uber to here. and then be picked up from an Uber afterwards, which where we're located in Memphis is a sparsely traveled area. And I think it's probably the first time an Uber driver had ever been down this street and was very reluctant to come. But yeah, that was the early stages of the interview process and coming on board.
Yeah. Yeah, I can understand the roads conversation. My father-in-law drove a gas truck out of the bulk plant in Memphis, right? And so he would go down to the river,
Yeah,
and this is a conversation for every Thanksgiving and Christmas for the last 20 years is how terrible roads are in Memphis
it
because
is
they live a little
shocking
ways
how
away
bad
from it.
they are.
It really is, but maybe that's what helps keep it have the hometown feel. Is that like it's harder to get there, so you got to be very intentional about going.
Oh, yeah.
Um, so, tell me a little bit about BR Distilling, or more importantly, Blue Note. Just kind of give me
Yeah.
the elevator speech on who you guys are.
Yeah, so I mean the quick hit is federal license granted back in 2014, so that makes us the oldest licensed facility in Western Tennessee and in Memphis. But really, the early days is nothing like what the company turned into today. So it was originally Pyramid Vodka, which unfortunately did a lot of things incorrectly and ultimately had to be wound down. But a group acquired the licensure in 2017, and even then, there really wasn't a focus on what you know of as Blue Note today. It was a lot of third-party services. So think about uh, barrel storage, third-party bottling, things like that that are more behind the scenes. But for us, it was really interesting to see how now we've shipped to around 125 different partners. Like the actual story of the liquid strategy behind these brands that a lot of consumers aren't ultimately aware of, but also just to see how some of these public companies interact. Like we worked with Constellation, Diageo, Eastside, some celebrity brands on the bottling. Really kind of got our feet wet, saw some of the pitfalls associated with the industry, and worked through some early stage decisions to avoid those. And then ultimately, the brand came out in 18, really got going in 2021 when we started to throw some gasoline on the fire.
So, just from 2018, when the brand sort of begins, to 2024, you're looking at 6 years worth of growth through some business conditions that no one could have ever imagined were going to be the case, right?
Yeah,
We've got this 3-year period between 2020 and 2023 that just sort of is a black hole of business almost to
yeah,
speak. But you guys have grown a brand that is gaining some pretty significant recognition all the way up until news that is released, as of recording this, today. So
yep.
kind of give me your success story of what we've got going on right now.
Yeah, no, I mean it really is crazy to see the progression of the brand. And the one thing you hinted at is just the most recent, and that is our Blue Note Juke Joint, Blue Note Crossroads, now 3 years in a row getting double gold from San Francisco, which trips us into the highly coveted platinum category. And I was just looking through the list of those that got double golds along with us this year. And I mean, you're in a very good crowd. And it's like I'm looking at, okay, you're with George T. Stagg, you're with some of the best Elijah Craig stuff out there, Larcenies, you're beating out Blanton's. So it's
Mhm.
just like really, really well known names. And to find ourselves there, which these SKUs are all from 21 forward. So a very, very short time frame.
Mm.
And the accolades, getting the number 7 in the world from Whiskey Advocate for our cask strength version, like brands that have been around for 20, 30 plus years couldn't even dream of the stuff that we've attained. Um, and I think what's surprising for a lot of people is it's still a really small company. There's
Mhm.
around 20 people that work for us. That includes our sales, our operations, our marketing. So a really tight knit group. But what we've done and the product that we're pushing out really is truly, truly incredible. And when you look back, I know you talked about the progression of everything from pre-pandemic to where we're at now. I remember just the early days, even before the pandemic happened, we started to get some like whispers from some of our suppliers of, hey, like, have you seen anything? And it's, well, no, we haven't, but let's go ahead and start looking at some of our glass orders, get ahead of that. Then it's get ahead of everything else. And the craziest indicator for us was when the plastic seal that goes on every single one of our bottles went from a couple of days to a couple of weeks to 32-week lead time overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And we were luckily at the transition size phase where we could go direct to manufacturer for everything, including glass,
Mm-hmm.
which really allowed us to survive where so many other brands were really negatively impacted. Um, Obviously, it took a lot of capital for us to be able
Yeah.
to buy literally millions of dollars of glass and then store it. Um, but it was interesting. That was the first real world outside of just living in the financial model of you have to be thinking so far ahead and reacting to not just unknowns, but events that before that no one in the supply chain had ever even like contemplated. And some of the people we used to bottle with, they had 10 plus person expert supply chain management crews, and they completely imploded. And you've
Mm-hmm.
got me who's just piecing all this stuff together and somehow made it work. It was just kind of cool to see how all those pieces came together. Um, but then just how much that the market's changed pre to post. I was talking about some of the early products we had were some 15-year-old single barrels.
Mm-hmm.
And the feedback we got for it pre pandemic was, I mean, maybe we'll take a 15-year-old cast strength single barrel, but it better be less than $50 a bottle. And that was a hard sell of a $50 cast strength 15 plus year old barrel. Whereas now you think about it, it's like that would be hard to sell to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was the transition to, okay, proof point is going to be the main selling point. So having SKUs that are able to transition through all those different environments, it's not that we always got everything right, but I think we've got a good direction and a good price point that we continue to focus on. That even coming out of the pandemic, when unfortunately a lot of brands went the ultra premium route and are seeing those sales not just slow but completely disappear. Um, it certainly wasn't the easy decision for us to make. It's the one that cost us obviously a lot of money, a lot of burn in the early days, but it's one that we see the longevity with and are happy to see our investors and our employees get behind.
Yeah, and I'll say, if you were to put out a 15-year single barrel at $50 a bottle, there's a lot of us out here that would try to buy every single one of them because that would be easy to turn that around for three
Yeah,
times the money.
yeah,
That's where the market is now.
yeah,
And you touched on something, and I want to go back to that a little bit. The names that you kind of threw up that are also in this double gold conversation
yeah,
from the festival. Um, and how you guys compete as far as price point, right? Because you said, the Stags of the world, the Elijah Craig Barrel Proofs of the world,
yeah,
the Blantons of the world, for this matter. What is your price point, right?
yeah.
So kind of throw that out there.
Yeah, and this is what is really cool about San Francisco is you're stacked up against everyone, and it's a blind tasting. So price doesn't matter. But all of the products we're talking about are under $50, and they should be available on every single shelf in the 17 states that we're in. And for a brand to be able to say that to distributors, retailers, bars, so on off premise, is a very rare position to be able
Mhm.
to come up with that argument.
Yeah, and in a world where there's sort of an infinite number of brands that might have 4-year MGP on the shelf at 45 or $50, right?
Yeah,
That's pretty standard, but
yeah,
to kind of toss on top of that, you guys have what is in my opinion, and from its launch, the Crossroads offering a toasted French oak that
yeah,
lives below that price point,
yeah,
is quite possibly one of the most interesting things when it came out. Because I'm a huge French oak fan. Any kind of French oak, I'm like, yeah, I want to give me the peppery, give me the tannin, give me the things that you get from French oak. Um, but to see one sub 50 is incredibly rare.
yeah,
Aside from maybe one other major distiller,
yeah,
how do you guys do this? Like, how are you able to maintain a business in a
yeah.
price that is significantly below some of your competitors?
Yeah, so I mean, ultimately, this comes down to the long term view. Your cogs in the early days, they certainly hurt. And it's what decisions are you making so that long term you are competitive with the higher volume players. And like, there's no way around it. What we are doing is a very difficult price point to compete at.
Mhm.
We're not competing against mom and pops, nothing wrong with that. We are competing against some very large, multi-billion dollar players in this industry.
Mhm.
And that's just the reality of it. Um, but yeah, there's we're very proud of the price points we've gone with, and yeah, Crossroads is one that we've played around. We've made some changes from the early launches, but really happy with where it's turned out. And we'll be releasing a cast strength version of that hopefully in the next couple of months. Just need to get some artwork completed, but really excited to get that expression out there. And then continuing just layer on some additional horizontal and verticals for these SKUs. But once again, having everything at a very approachable price point, regardless of whatever the market's doing around us.
Yeah, and you answered a question that I had for a little bit later on already. There, there is a pending cask strength version of this coming out.
There is.
So if we think about the launch of Crossroads, right, the beginning of that, um, your oak comes from a very specific region in France. You can kind
Yep.
of trail it back to that. How do you end up saying this is the one? Like we're gonna dive into this particular region of France for oak.
Yeah, so there's a lot of R&D that goes into pretty much everything we do. So multiple combinations, different type of staves that you're working with. But then even outside of just the Crossroads, we have pretty broad R&D that we do here. And some of that stuff is obviously different sizes of cooperage, different types of cooperage, different amounts of aging times. But then for us, it's how are you adjusting all those things even throughout different cycles of the year. Then it's different blending techniques, things like that. But yeah, it is not a quick turn for us to get stuff to market. And like some of the R&D, like the special reserve that we released last year, some of that stuff had secondary finishing for 3+ years.
Hmm.
And I think that's where some people understand, okay, the base element is aging, but sometimes the addition or creation of these new SKUs, it literally takes years to figure it out. And I think that's one thing that we have gotten right, where some people maybe haven't had the luxury of allowing products to be ready before pushing them to market. Some of our products have certainly changed from the original releases, but even the original release should have been something that people would not be put off by.
Hmm.
And that's one thing that's really hard when you are in a consumer discretionary luxury class product. If they taste your product and it's bad, they're probably not coming back to your brand ever again.
Hmm.
And it's just one of those things you always have to remind everybody in the ops crew about, and everybody in through marketing sales, is like sometimes you only get one chance to get it right. And trying to focus on that harsh reality of this industry.
Yeah, and that can be the kind of thing that can stifle innovation and creativity.
Yeah.
There's a brand that I can imagine or I can think of right now that went to the expense of building a very specific type of still operation that they then subsequently distilled some rye out of, and it was really really divisive in the marketplace. It was one of those flavors that a lot of people were like, I don't like it, but it was this innovative approach. It was this thing, and there was an outcome that kind of came out of it. How do you combat that, right? Because right now, what I'm seeing is that you guys are a 20-person company that
Yep.
does logistics, research and development, sales, and trying to innovate. Like
Yep.
this, it's 20 people, right? Like that's it's not even a football team, right? Like you don't even have a football team's worth of a staff, and you're able to do all of these things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's the benefit, but also some of the difficulty of a small business. The small brings the fact that you can be flexible. The complicated side of it is it's a lot of hats to wear. Um, but no, I mean, it's sort of just the reality of you work with what you have. And obviously, the company will continue to grow as we continue to see success. But um, I think something that's interesting too about some of the early product development and having the benefit of the small team is that it's not that we had one person dedicated to just product development.
Mm.
It's there may have been an idea that one person came up with, but when it comes to sampling, tasting, blending, like there's multiple people involved in that, and those multiple people will change depending on whoever's in the room. So
Mhm.
if it's a marketing meeting and people are tasting through it, well, then marketing people are going to have their feedback. If it's sales is in town, sales has their feedback. If it's different people in operations, they get to have their different feedback as well. And it's not ultimately that everyone's voice determines the final outcome, but everyone's voice is involved in it. And I think that's an interesting approach, especially when you consider outside of our sales and now some of our marketing people, nobody had industry experience in this business.
Mhm.
So yes, they had some experience from like on premise, some liquor store backgrounds, but nobody was a liquor supplier. So to have some of the um, just the interesting things we've created without that background, I think is really cool. And it's allowed us to think outside of the box and also come up with some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. And I guess sort of related to that line of thought, as you think about expanding your operation, and what you guys are doing, you're a small group. Is it Are you more interested in finding people with industry background or with people with more of a startup mentality, an agile nature of being able to wear many hats? Like, how do you build a team?
Well, the answer is yes, and it comes down to both. But it's also the type of person you're looking for changes as the company grows.
Mhm.
So early stages, a person that wears 40 hats is really beneficial. But then also as you're growing, you're looking for people that can specialize and make sure certain tasks are getting done and there isn't any training associated with it.
Mhm.
So like sales, marketing, things like that, you need the creative, but you also need somebody that has literally the connections to get stuff going on day one. So that's where like there's different levels within the organization, even within sales and marketing, where there's certainly opportunity to learn. Um, but it is, I would say it's an interesting transition point and it's something that even I was texting one of our uh, directors about on the board. It's a weird feeling to be in a position where like I'm not the only person responsible for making sure some of these key items get done. It's I've got salespeople, I've got finance people, I've got marketing people now that even a year or so ago it was still okay. Well, this is what I'm going to do, and like the rest of the team obviously was participating in that, but just being able to rely on some of these key individuals is a very different position than I'm used to.
Yeah. So, we've talked a little bit about the Crossroads, which was not necessarily the primary SKU to begin with,
Yep.
right? So let's maybe take a step backwards and talk
Yep.
about Juke Joint, right?
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about Juke Joint.
Yeah, so juke joint, we pitch it really as sort of your everyday sipper. It's a good
Mhm.
intro to the category because even though a lot of people talk about cask strength products all day, every day, the vast majority of the market's still an 80 proof drinker.
Mhm.
And a lot of people through college or whatever are used to drinking an 80 proof product. And a lot of people don't necessarily have a favorable view of an 80 proof product. So having something that wasn't that full on jump to either bottle and bond at 100 or cast strength offering, we saw as really a great opportunity where not a whole lot of people were really playing it. And even if they were around that proof point, there was still a good number of people that were chill filtering. And to show people what a product tastes like that is non-chill filtered and to see the expression on their face when they're surprised that 90 plus 120 proof alcohol can actually have less of a burn than the 80 proof that they're used to drinking, is really a cool thing to see on a pretty consistent basis.
Yeah, and you touched on something there. That yes, the majority of the marketplace is not looking for cask strength whiskey, and I imagine it is a difficult thing to navigate, right? Because you could even look at it from, the people who might write your review for, the Whiskey Advocate or any whiskey specific publication. It's going to have one set of taste, whereas Rob Reporter GQ is going to be a different person, right? Because that's more lifestyle than it
Yep.
is whiskey. You're trying to find a way to um, keep the whiskey nerds happy, because we all want the cask strength, but also like you build your brand off of your second, third, and fourth bottle sale, not the first bottle sale. And if you're somebody who does things like some of us do, and you have 100 bottles, what are the odds you're going to buy a second one, right?
Yep.
Because you're worried about collecting them all. It's like a weird game of Pokemon or something.
Yep.
And so the juke joint is the entry. Now there is an opportunity to get into cask strength through the uncut series. So what's
Correct.
the uncut series
Yeah,
about?
so the uncut offering is currently our cast strength, and that's currently available in either single barrel format or cast strength blend. There's actually going to be a transition of that SKU also in the next couple of months, where the uncut will transition to more of an everyday small batch cast strength blend. Then they'll have
Mhm.
a single barrel on top of that. And some of that was actually in planning, but it's really the timing of that is going to coincide really well with some of the market conditions we've seen.
Mhm.
Obviously, consumers continue to have just fewer and fewer dollars with inflation just dragging and dragging and dragging. Um, but also, we've seen particularly a lot of difficulty with independent retailers in making some of these larger purchases associated with single barrels. So, really trying to adjust to the market and have something that's more what consumers are looking for in that cast strength, but also more readily available for retailers to purchase as well.
Now, and maybe stepping away from some of the versions you have out there, the double gold from the competition is not the only new news that you have, and I will say this, and I I grew up playing tennis, right, and this
Yeah.
is going to sound weird for anybody who does not know where this is going, right? If you just tune in right now, it doesn't make sense. I grew up playing tennis. I enjoy tennis, and pickleball players are the bane of a tennis player's existence, because you play pickleball over the winter and then you don't keep your feet moving. And then whenever you get into the spring and summer, when it's time to play tennis again, you want to stand here, you don't move as much. It's not as much agility, and you got to sort of retrain. So all the people who play pickleball over the winter then have to relearn tennis in the summer. All that to say, you guys are now the spokes, the brand for the Major League Pickleball.
Yep. So we are
Is
now
this right?
the official bourbon and whiskey sponsor of Major League Pickleball. So that was another thing that happened. Official announcement this week. So a big week for us.
Yeah.
But yeah, some major market activations this year and continuing to grow with MLP as it grows. But as we looked at it, it's pretty rare to come across a sporting category that's actually growing, and that's kind of sad to say, but so many of these large leagues are actually in pretty
Mhm.
significant decline. And like the barriers to entry, even though they're in decline, are still substantial when it comes to the dollars associated with it. But then it was a lot of connections that gave us great media access. The markets that they're in coincides really well with our focus markets. But really, what sealed the deal for me was it had been presented as this opportunity for us to look at. I was down in Tampa at an event, and the people next to us just completely unprovoked are just happening talking about pickleball. It's like, okay,
Mhm.
well that's cool. I'm looking at a proposal right now, so heard it there. Come back and have breakfast the next week, and this group of retired people at the breakfast table next to us, same thing, just talking about pickleball, obsessed with pickleball. And it's the more and more you listen to what people are talking about is pickleball is referenced one way or another. And it was so interesting because like the key age range is 35 plus. Well, that ties in exactly to our core audience.
Mhm.
So many of the other demographics, as far as like income, matched perfectly. So it was a really great opportunity for us to have the ability to really jump on, because just like any brand, as you can imagine, people are reaching out on a regular basis,
Mhm.
wanting you to give your money to. But it was really rare for somebody that really wanted to collaborate and grow with you. That's what MLP provided for us.
Yeah, and so you touched on the thing that is the real reason why tennis players don't like pickleball is because it's growing, right? Like
Yes.
it is in everybody's conversation. It is the segment. If I were to think about 15, 20 years ago when cornhole started kind of on its rise as I'm not going to call pickleball a casual sport, but it
Yep.
is easier to play at an entry level, just,
Yep.
off of the street than most sports are.
Yep.
Um, and so it had a similar introduction, at least from what I saw, into the sports marketplace, but it has blown past that in popularity because it grabbed the audience, the people who have the money to spend, the people that are interested in watching it, and it's a hell of a lot more fun to watch than the cornhole or, and I'll say it, tennis or golf or any number of other sports that are out there. It's generically more fun to watch, but you know, as you guys approach this partnership, um, would we expect to potentially see like a product line to match it? Are you looking for something unique?
Yeah, so that's where marketing and sales certainly have their requests currently, and as I think we get into more activations, there'll be some more specific products directly lined with it. So right now, it's making sure your point of sale, some of that basic stuff is in place, taking advantage of the uh, collaboration for logo usage, things like that. But um, definitely as we continue into this multi-year deal, there's going to be some unique things that come out, I'm sure.
And I'm kind of imagining what the world could be for a special release because you guys have done a series of really impressive releases. You're talking about in the past you were doing 15-year-old single barrels.
Yep,
We did a premium small batch, which was a 9-year minimum
yep.
age, a single barrel reserve, which was a 10-year minimum age, a 17-year.
Bunch of
The last,
17s.
yeah, the bunch of 17s, the Las Notas, and I
Yeah,
probably pronounced that wrong.
no, you're right.
And then your special reserve, which had one, two, three, four, five, six, 7 different types of wood involved
Uh-huh.
in it. Innovation sort of stays in the back burner, and I think the thing that I do appreciate is you guys are experimenting, but you're not saying just because we did it once doesn't mean we're going to continue to always
Yeah,
do it right. You're consistently changing some of the innovation that comes into play there. And then there's probably some place for rye to play into this pickleball thing because you can get some of those dill notes out of rye from time to time,
uh-huh.
right? So there's a thing that's in there. Tell me about the Blue Note rye.
Yeah, so that was launched, I guess that was late last fall now, but we've seen really good success with that. And if your listeners are like most people, the response that I hear more often than not is, I don't drink rye, even if you've never had rye in your entire life. I mean, 90+% of the time, that is the response you get. So it was okay if seemingly no one drinks rye, but rye is this growing category. What can we do to have a product that stands out from what most people associate the rye profile? Because, like, the reality is, MGP rye dominates the market and has a very
Mhm.
specific profile, even at the 95.5. Well, ours, it's still 95.5, but the profile that comes through has a lot more bourbon qualities associated with it. And having just like those transition notes has opened up, we see the category to a lot more introductory rye drinkers getting into it. People that are used to drinking rye every day still appreciate it. But it's just a nice way for us to continue to just broaden the people that are getting used to our products.
Mhm. And right now, that's coming out at a standard bottling proof of nine.
That's a 93 proof on
Yeah,
that
93
one.
proof.
And the COLA submission is pending approval. Despite it saying that it was going to be approved in a day, obviously we're still a week out. Hopefully that gets approved this week. Boxes are already done. Labels should get printed pretty quickly, and then we'll have the cast strength version of that one in market as well.
Yeah, and I think I saw maybe it was from Coming Whiskey the submission, right? Because he usually throws up the
Yeah,
submissions as they kind of come through or
yeah.
whatever. Um, it's always interesting to see it. You're exactly right. And I was one of those people. I don't like rye. I don't like rye whiskey. And I think at least for some of us, we may have had one rye at one point in time, and sometimes it's 100% rye, sometimes it's some other thing, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's some crafty thing that didn't taste very good.
Hmm.
And the reality is that there's a lot of people that like rye whiskey that don't know it yet. And I
Yeah.
think that there is probably almost as much room for growth in the rye marketplace as there is probably in the American single malt marketplace.
Yeah.
While bourbon may constrict, these other two will grow to match that.
Yeah.
Um, that does that become a conversation? Does American single malt ever become a conversation for Blue Note?
Honestly, probably not. Um, Sadly, most of what I've had I don't like, and
Right.
it's hard for me to get behind something I don't like. But it's also we're focused so much on what we're doing right now that we haven't had a need to diversify into a whole nother side with American single malt. Um, and I think it was more created out of necessity than people necessarily wanting it. And what
Mhm.
I mean by that was I think it was driven by the cooperage. Um, if there wouldn't have been a cooperage issue, I don't think you would have people really pushing that much money into American single
Mhm.
malt. There are a couple of brands out there that are using new cooperage for it. I think Bullet is still using new cooperage for some of their um, American single malt, but I think they're one of the rare ones that is.
Mhm.
A lot of these distilleries, it was the simple fact that they don't have access to cooperage. So either you go out of business or you put it in used cooperage. What does that allow you to do? And they went to American single malt.
Yeah, that's it. So I guess speaking of cooperage, where do you guys what do you guys do for cooperage? What's your
Yeah,
upstream
so
and downstream
luckily with
forge out?
Bardstown Green River, they're buying 250,000 barrels a year. So our access to cooperage is not
Mhm.
in question. But yeah, it's predominantly ISC and West Virginia on the cooperage side. And that was uh, a big reality check, especially in the last couple of years. We're lucky enough that we have some connections, people that have been at the largest distilleries in the world for 30 plus years. And when they start to worry about their internal supply chain of cooperage,
Mhm.
you really start to look at it. And when the salespeople that you used to work with at the cooperages no longer are there, because what's the point of having a sales force when a product is 100% sold? Like all those waterfall issues was interesting to see. But then a thing I like to talk about, just because bourbon is the first stage of so many products. It goes into tequila, goes into scotch. Just as an example, our empty barrels pre-pandemic, full tractor trailer loads, Scotland, Mexico used to sell for like $25 a piece.
Mhm.
That exact same barrel now is a couple $100s, and it's predominantly not going to Mexico. It's predominantly not going to. If you're not a large conglomerate that has vertical integration of their bourbon whiskey goes to Scotland, goes to their tequila markets, like not only is your price going through the roof, but you may not have access to those other products as well. And it's just interesting to just see these carry-on effects that hit us first, but always go down the line.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned this a little bit earlier. 100% of the whiskey you are dealing with may not be specifically for Blue Note. You're partnering with other people. What's that like on kind of being a supplier for some smaller brands?
Well, so luckily we are out of the supplying other people
Right.
business. Um, we wound all of that down officially in 21, and
Oh, okay.
it really was the pandemic forced our hand. It was good revenue, but
Hmm.
ultimately every single time they had an issue, it impacted our business, and allowing us to focus solely on our product was really a big step for the company. And it cleaned up a whole lot of things. And there's certainly ways to for us to get back into the third party side of it. But right now, the brand is our sole focus.
So and I think I read an article about you guys secured some new lines of credit that's
Yeah,
allowing you to kind of maybe reinvest some of your capital for sales or marketing growth.
yeah,
What does the growth strategy for Blue Note look like? Because you're primarily in the south and eastern states.
yeah.
Is it to grow to other states? Is it to grow your share in those states? What's the future look like?
Yeah, so it's currently predominantly southeastern U.S. footprint, so as far west as really Texas, Colorado, but then we also are expanding our northeast presence. But for us, it's less geographic, and like you implied, it's a lot deeper focus in our existing markets. So that'll be continuing to expand our sales team, allowing our marketing dollars to really get traction in conjunction with the sales force on the ground. And if you look at the markets that we're in, we have every ability to achieve enough market share to utilize all the inventory that we have laid down. But another thing that people just often forget is how much capital it really takes to be in this business.
Hmm.
And like inventory has such a long life cycle to it. It's a lot of money sitting there and evaporating, and that's a hard pitch to a lot of investors.
You're not wrong, and I think you did touch on it earlier. Trying to coming from a financial sector, right? You're looking to try to understand market trends, market conditions on maybe a 5-year time frame,
Yep,
whereas you're aging your whiskey for 5 years to then sell. Right, so
yep,
you're trying to project a 7 or an 8 year market time place, and what are your trends going to need to be? What
yep,
is your liquid strategy? What is your wood strategy? All of these different things, and
yep,
knowing that you can't do anything about it between now and then. And
yep,
sometimes you open the barrel and it's empty at the end of
yep.
that 5 to 7 year time frame.
No, and
Um,
that's what's so crazy is you have your financial projections, but then you also have everything on the inventory side. I mean, it's no exaggeration. You're 20 years out on the inventory,
mhm,
and there's vertical, horizontal SKUs with price points designated for all of those at each of the age ranges as the availability opens up. Um, and it's having all of those things right now lives in an Excel spreadsheet, but you always have to be aware of what those opportunities are because ultimately that's driving your future business. But the thing that is really interesting in the bourbon marketplace is while there is the focus on innovation, you also have to have like core products that can stand on their own. Um, and it is once again like what we're doing with our price point, what we're doing with trying to have core items is a very hard thing when there's people that have a new product available on the shelf every other week. The flip side of that is, are you going to have a retailer pick up the 40th iteration of your bottle when number
mhm,
1 through 39 are still sitting there? The
right.
answer is probably not. So it is that delicate balancing act, and ultimately, there's not a right way or a wrong way, but we like what we're doing, and there's a lot of thought, and I would say more constraint that goes into it than simply just allowing things to go to market, even if people might be asking for it at the time, because some of the stuff it takes a while to actually get out there.
Yeah, I mean, because I try to look at it from two different perspectives. I look at it from the nerd side, the what we all want, and we want that innovation. We want to see everything
Yeah,
else that's coming out. But then I also try to put myself in the position of the liquor store owner, the bar owner, and then the brand themselves, right? Because um, you're exactly right. The worst thing you can do is compete with yourself for shelf space on a
yeah,
previous release that hasn't moved through because it just isn't a great. Even though it could have been fantastic,
yeah,
and maybe you're just in a smaller market that doesn't have the ability to pull through all of that product. But it's like, if I'm a store owner and I have three other variations that you've done on the shelf and they're not gone, how can I convince you to put something else?
yeah,
Whereas if you have a continual line and they're full, that doesn't mean that the store down the road isn't full and you can replenish them, right? Because
yeah,
replenishment is where you're going to make your money. It's not the
yeah,
first bottle, it's the third bottle, the fifth bottle, the seventh bottle.
exactly.
But we all want all the new things. So,
But still,
you
make
know,
sure that R&D keeps going to market.
right. Yeah. So there's got to be some, and I think that's what I appreciate from brands that are cautious about their innovation is
Yeah,
that we know you're going to put out a couple of good things a year that we want
yeah,
to try, but I only have so many dollars to spend too, right? Like
Yeah.
I only have so many dollars to spend, and if I have a new best shiny thing to buy every month, then I start deciding, do I need to pay for dance lessons this month, or do I need to buy whiskey? And I know what my wife says: it's the dance lessons. It goes for my children, not for me. Obviously, I already know how to dance super well. If I think about some of the things that you guys have done for innovation, is there anything coming up that we can talk about, or that you can talk about that might be coming out?
Yeah, I mean, so in addition to our true like LTOs, Halo items, which usually have a higher price associated with them, we are going to have more just seasonal releases. And I hate to call this stuff innovative because it's not that you're the first mover. Like we had honey cask finishes that we had in
Mhm.
market a couple of years ago, but it's doing it correctly, I think goes a long way. So there's unfortunately some honey releases out there that just aren't good. And for us, it was now you spend a lot of money because honey is extremely expensive.
Mhm.
You fill your barrels, you let the honey actually get absorbed into the wood to the point where you literally have thousands upon thousands of honeybees that find the barrels, so they're sitting outside and adding to it. So it's a longer production cycle. You let the products age then for a lengthy period of time, not just a couple of weeks or a couple of months. So it's just taking the harder steps to come up with these products. And then once you do that, making them available at, once again, a reasonable price point. It's not going to be free, but it's not going to be a $200 bottle either. Um, and then there is going to be, I would say, continued expansion when it comes to blending, and that's what was really nice to see with the special reserve of, okay, you've got this $200+ bottle, which theoretically no one in their right mind should ever blend together. When I did the cola submission, even the examiner feedback, it wasn't from a regulatory standpoint. It was, are you sure you want to do this? And it's like, well, just be clear, it's already done. The blend is complete. This is
Right.
literally just showing you what all went into it. But it was interesting to get that feedback because like R&D doesn't always turn out well. We have some barrels that are terrible. And then it's, well, could you possibly blend those out? Well, sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. They're just bad barrels. But with the special reserve, it's seeing what we did there, and can we take different variations of that, different age ranges, and have more seasonal releases in line with that type of product? And the answer is, I think we can. We're tasting through a bunch of stuff right now, and it shows really well. But I mean, it all comes back to doing it properly, getting really expensive cooperage because good cooperage is expensive. If you're doing some sort of secondary finish where there's a wine or liqueur, you're using really good base ingredients that go into making sure those barrels are charged. And then something too is allowing the wood to actually do the process, not just dumping in and blending in whatever wine and calling that finished, because it's not, it's just blended.
Yeah, and I think maybe this is the thing that makes me optimistic about, barrel finishing. Has been a very significant thing for the past couple of years,
Yeah.
right? Everybody's trying to find what the next what is 2024's version of Amberana going to be, right?
Yep.
Because everybody did Amberana over the last 2 or 3 years to varying degrees of success. Now everybody wants to find the next thing,
Yep.
what's it going to be? But it's also introduced us as consumers to what that individual barrel would do to a bourbon. So
Yep.
then when we look at blending together something like cognac, Madeira, sherry, port, white oak, and VDN, right? When you put those
Yep.
together, we can start framing out in our minds whether we think this is going to be good or not. Because if you'd
Yep.
asked me 10 years ago if that's going to be good, I probably would have told you. I don't know if you remember what it was like using watercolors when you were a little kid, but after you blended enough of them
It all
together, you ended
goes.
up with like a
Yep.
milky gray color. That's
Yep.
everything just became that.
Yep.
That's where my brain would have went
Yep.
initially. But these different barrel finishes, I think, have put us in a place where we can understand the art of blending, and I think blending is kind of the next iteration of creativity that comes
Yep.
into the North American whiskey marketplace. I mean, barrel finishing's been a thing in Scotch forever, right?
Yep.
Like we're slowly realizing maybe sometimes those folks do know something, even if we don't necessarily like their whiskey. They found a thing that does work out.
Uh-huh.
Um, if I'm in Memphis, right, and I want to experience Blue Note, do you
Yeah.
guys have a tasting room that I can visit, a
Yeah.
place that I can come on site?
Yeah, so we have a pretty small tasting room. It's honestly was a let's see, when was that? As a winter construction project for me,
Hmm.
um, and so opened that up. That would have been early last year. But we have around 110,000 square feet of production storage space here in Memphis. So we have tours open to the public Thursdays and Fridays, and then a little bottle shop and tasting room um, Monday through Friday as well. And hopefully we'll be expanding into weekend hours. One of
Hmm.
the big things for us um, was we wanted, if people are going to be on site, to actually experience everything we're doing. Like they'll actually see the barrels, they'll see us pulling the barrels down, see the blending, the bottling, that whole process, and not just being told it all happens over there. Like I've been on some extremely disappointing tours at
Right.
very, very large facilities that I would have thought would have been much more exciting, where they're literally telling you, well, over there behind that wall is where X, Y, and Z occurs. And then they take you to something that isn't actually the way you do it. And you're just like, that's not how you actually do this process, but we'll just nod and go along with it.
Hmm.
But another key point too is the people that are giving our tours, they aren't professional tour guides. They are marketing people, they're salespeople. They have a role within the company, and then they're just doing tours on whatever day that they're assigned to. So what they're telling you is a different story, slightly different each time. And it's not that they're like unable to actually answer a question. It's they've lived it for the most part for years. So if there's some nuance, they've probably lived it. I can tell you about it.
I guess, and if I'm an employee, and there's this rolling roster of who is in charge of the tours, um, is that a place where you're excited to talk to people about it, or is like, man, I really should call in that day because I don't want to do the tours, or is it some blend of those two items?
It's definitely a blend. I think it comes down to the group. The more engaging that the people are, the more fun that our tour guides have as well. And it's if the people understand or want to learn more, those are a lot better groups. Obviously, you've got some people that are there thinking that they're just going to get drunk, and that's really not what this is intended to be. But no, I think it's been really beneficial to us because, like I said, if they're in sales and marketing, they're getting feedback from people that, by and large, are not from our existing markets. So being able to collect that information and then feed that back into the rest of the organization, we've seen a lot of benefit from that. And like, yeah, our tasting room is small, but we've literally had people traveling exclusively to Memphis from all over the world just to come to us and to see how wide our reach has gotten. Um, it really is going to drive some of our more strategic decisions when it gets to, okay, deeper in this market. And if we get to a stage where we're looking to expand, these are the locations that we're looking at. And the reason is because we've had X, Y, and Z number of people literally on site emailing us every single day demanding our product, and they're frustrated they can't get the product. So to be in that position is a really great one to be in.
And I know we're just a couple of days away from entering one of the most important months for the city of Memphis, right?
Yep,
Like May is a big deal in
it
Memphis if
is.
not from Memphis. And so I can imagine that you're going to have an opportunity for people that are traveling maybe in for what you guys are doing, or just are there tangentially for the other festivities that
Yep.
happen during the month of May. I always hated that, right? Because we're only a 2.5 hour drive from Memphis, but it was always the Memphis and May activities were right around finals week when I was in college, and so it was like
Uh-huh.
I want to go, but also I need to finish college, right?
Yep.
And those two things don't coalesce into each other very well sometimes.
Yep.
Um, and I know we're running right up on time here. Is there anything that we need to talk that I've missed? Talking about Blue Note and what you guys have going on that we needed to kind of touch back on.
No, I mean, I think there's just so much to look back on over the last year or so. I mean, between the awards that we've gotten, expanding our facility here. So going from 29 now up to 110,000 square feet. We brought on a new VP of sales. So he's in the process of really expanding the sales team at really an expert level that we haven't had the benefit of that type of leadership in the past. New CFO coming on board, getting all the production contracts and everything lined up with Bardstown and Green River, getting the finance pieces in place. Everything as far as like price point, product strategy, all of that, seeing that work. It's an exciting time, and it's weird to look back on all the different changes and things that have happened over the last few years, but you layer on the marketing changes and MLP and things like that, and I think we're all just excited as a small group to get this thing going and continue to grow the company.
And maybe this will be the last question I'll kind of hit you with, and maybe you have this prepared or not. If I'm wanting to come across, Blue Note as a brand, are there any, aside from maybe Memphis in May, are there any events or activities that you guys are going to be a part of, where I can kind of get introduced to the brand in the coming months?
Yeah, so we have various activations around our markets, and I believe all that stuff is going to be on our website. If not, that should be updated soon. That's in progress, but be in San Antonio. I'll actually pull it up and see what dates that is because I just booked my plane tickets. The 18th, we have an event in San Antonio. I don't know, that's the next one we have, and then we've got pickleball activation in Atlanta, which is, I think, May 9th through the 11th. So a lot of things coming on in the near term, and then just more activations as the year builds, especially getting into the OND time of the year when things really get going.
Yeah, and kind of to touch on that, that's, the details are at bluenotebourbon.com.
Yep.
You're also Blue Note Bourbon on social media. So
Correct.
probably Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, maybe.
I think we have an account. Whether or not it's being built out, we'll see if TikTok exists in a year or so. So
Right. Yeah. It was one of those things like everybody rushed to TikTok. Now it's like, I don't know if that matters as much, at least in the short term. Let's make sure we're investing our time wisely.
yeah,
Logan, thank you very much for the time that you've given to me today. I always kind of say, time is the one thing you can't make more of. So I'm appreciative that you're, willing to hop on and talk about this. This isn't a joke. The first time that I tasted the Blue Note Crossroads,
yeah,
I immediately knew like there's a lot of new brands that enter the marketplace, but this is something that was very intentional and very
yeah,
well thought out, and at a price point that I don't think anyone is capable of beating. It's an impressive offering. Not to say that the juke joint isn't, and that the new rye, there's a lot of bourbon in the marketplace. There's not a ton of well done French oak.
yeah. Yeah, well, you're speaking to me because Crossroads is my favorite, and it's sort of the little pet project that I've definitely enjoyed working on. So I like that.
Well, I'm glad there is a pet project.
Yeah,
That is a thing, and whatever the next French oak thing is, I'm here for it. The cask strength already
yeah,
has. I've already earmarked some budget towards it. While you were talking, just put it over on the side, make sure I get that taken
awesome.
care of. Yeah. So thanks for hanging out today. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Embellish Pod. If you enjoyed this, please leave me a review on whatever platform that you're consuming this on. Leave a comment if possible. Hit me up on social media on TikTok for as long as that is alive, or Instagram using EmbellishPod. Give me a follow so you can keep up with what's going on here. I can be found at www.embellishpod.com with all of my links, accounts, and contact details. Thanks for stopping by.